In a world where every encounter can lead to unexpected twists, one seemingly ordinary traffic stop spirals into an extraordinary tale of misunderstanding, prejudice, and ultimately, an unlikely alliance. Picture this, a racially charged interaction between a police officer and a black man who, unbeknownst to the officer, is an undercover FBI agent. As tension fills the air, the audience is left to wonder, how did it all lead to this moment? And what will happen next? Our story begins on a sunny afternoon in a suburban neighborhood, where Officer Mike Johnson, a seasoned cop with years of service, is patrolling the streets. He's known for his strict adherence to the law, but also for his biases that have shaped his view of the world. With a reputation that often precedes him, he's not the type to second-guess his instincts. When he spots a sleek black sedan speeding past him, his adrenaline kicks in. He flips on the lights and pulls the car over, convinced he's about to apprehend a dangerous suspect. Meanwhile, inside that very sedan sits Agent Malik Davis, a dedicated FBI agent on a covert mission. He's sharp, intelligent, and deeply committed to his work, representing the best of what law enforcement can be. However, today, he's just trying to navigate his way through the chaos of an undercover operation, unaware that the simple act of driving home could lead to a dramatic confrontation. The moment Malik sees the flashing lights in his rearview mirror, a wave of anxiety washes over him. He knows all too well the dangers of being a black man in America, and he can't shake the feeling that this stop could quickly escalate. As Officer Johnson approaches the car, he scans the driver with a mix of suspicion and expectation. He's been trained to profile, to assume the worst based on appearances, and he has no idea he's about to face a formidable opponent in a battle of wits. The tension is palpable as Officer taps on the window, his expression unreadable. Malik takes a deep breath, reminding himself to remain calm and composed. After all, he's not just any driver. He's trained for high-pressure situations. But the officer doesn't know that, and this is where our story takes a sharp turn. What unfolds next is a gripping dialogue filled with misunderstandings, accusations, and a clash of perspectives. Officer Johnson, fueled by preconceived notions, launches into a barrage of questions, his voice laced with authority. Malik responds calmly, attempting to de-escalate the situation, but his status as an agent seems to only fuel the officer's aggression. "Why are you driving so fast?" Johnson demands, eyeing Malik suspiciously. "You think you can just speed around these streets like you own the place?" The irony of the officer's words hangs heavily in the air. Malik remains poised, explaining his situation and showing his credentials. But the officer's hardened demeanor doesn't waver. The tension escalates, revealing deep-seated prejudices that neither man expected. Malik realizes that this isn't just a routine stop. It's a confrontation loaded with societal implications, each word exchanged acting as a mirror reflecting broader issues of race and authority. The stakes are higher than a simple ticket. This is a moment that could change their lives forever. Just when it seems like the situation might spiral completely out of control, a sudden twist of fate occurs. An unmarked vehicle pulls up, and out steps a fellow agent who recognizes Malik and the situation he's in. The look of shock on Officer Johnson's face, as he processes the identity of the man he just tried to interrogate, is palpable. The audience can almost feel the gears turning in his mind, as he grapples with the reality of who he was about to confront. Suddenly, the power dynamic shifts, and the air becomes thick with tension, as the true identity of the man in the car is revealed. The fallout from this encounter is sure to be significant. Will Officer Johnson be forced to confront his own biases? Or will he cling to his preconceived notions despite the evidence before him? What happens next for Malik, who is caught in a moment that challenges everything he knows about authority and race? As the scene unfolds, the audience is left on the edge of their seats, eager to see how this unexpected meeting will play out. What will the fallout be from this surprising encounter between a racist cop and a black FBI agent? Stay tuned, because the outcome is sure to be shocking, challenging everything you thought you knew about prejudice, power, and redemption. The story is just beginning, and the next chapter is about to reveal the unexpected consequences of this fateful stop. As the tension hung in the air, like a storm cloud ready to burst, both Officer Johnson and Agent Malik found themselves caught in a moment that could shift the course of their lives. Johnson, an officer who prided himself on upholding law, had spent years on force, a job he believed was his calling. But with every badge he polished and every criminal he apprehended, he unknowingly built walls around himself, walls reinforced by preconceived notions and racial biases. His background was typical of many in his small-town precinct. He came from a family of law enforcement officers and had witnessed firsthand the challenges of policing in a community rife with crime. However, his view of the world often leaned heavily toward a black and white interpretation of justice, ignoring the shades of grey that color humanity. Malik, on the other hand, carried the weight of expectations and the struggles that came with being a black man in a predominantly white profession. Growing up in a rough neighborhood, he witnessed the impact of systemic racism firsthand. His drive to become an FBI agent was fueled by a desire to change the narrative, to be the kind of agent who made a difference. However, despite his credentials and achievements, he knew that some would still see him through the lens of color rather than character. This reality weighed heavily on him, creating an undercurrent of tension in every interaction he had with law enforcement. As the unmarked car pulled up, Malik felt a mix of relief and dread. Out stepped his partner, Agent Sarah Collins, a seasoned investigator known for her quick thinking and fierce loyalty. She took one look at the scene and immediately sensed the gravity of the situation. The apprehensive look on Malik's face told her everything she needed to know. She had been in enough tight spots to recognize when things were about to spiral out of control. With her presence, she hoped to diffuse the escalating tension. "Malik?" Sarah called out, her voice firm but not aggressive. "What's going on here?" Her eyes flickered between her partner and the officer, trying to gauge the atmosphere. Malik took a deep breath, grateful for her arrival, but he knew the confrontation wasn't over. "This officer pulled me over for speeding, but it's more complicated than that," Malik explained, gesturing to Johnson, whose expression had shifted from suspicion to confusion. "He doesn't seem to believe I'm actually an FBI agent." Sarah stepped forward, presenting her own badge with confidence. "Officer, I'm Agent Collins with the FBI. Can you explain what's happening here?" There was authority in her tone, a subtle reminder of the power dynamics at play. Johnson glanced between them, the realization of his misjudgment dawning on him like a slow sunrise. His eyes widened, and the flush of embarrassment crept up his neck. He was caught in a moment of vulnerability, forced to confront the fact that he had judged Malik based solely on the color of his skin, rather than his identity as a federal agent. The badge he wore, which had always given him a sense of superiority, now felt heavy with the weight of his bias. I thought he was just another guy trying to speed through my neighborhood," Johnson stammered, struggling to find the right words. "I didn't know." The admission hung in the air, raw and uncomfortable. Sarah watched him carefully, sensing the internal conflict swirling within him. "This isn't just about a traffic stop, Officer Johnson. It's about the systemic issues that lead to these kinds of assumptions," she stated, her voice steady yet filled with urgency. "We have a job to do, and right now, we're on a sensitive operation." Malik's heart raced as he absorbed the unfolding scene. He could sense the shift in the officer's demeanor, but remained wary. Would this encounter become an opportunity for change, or just another example of a system that failed to understand the realities of race and justice? The questions loomed large in his mind. Johnson, still visibly shaken, took a step back. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. I didn't mean to, make any assumptions." His voice was low, and the sincerity in his tone was clear. But for Malik, the damage had already been done. Trust, once shattered, wasn't easily repaired. "What's your badge number?" Malik asked, his voice calm but firm, a direct challenge to the officer's authority. The question hung in the air, demanding accountability. Johnson hesitated, the tension palpable. He could feel the weight of Malik's gaze, filled with a mix of expectation and a demand for respect. "Oh, it's 451, he replied, finally breaking eye contact as he glanced down at his badge, a reminder of the duty he had sworn to uphold. "I'll make sure to report this. It won't happen again." The moment was fragile, teetering on the edge of resolution and further conflict. Sarah observed, determined to guide this conversation into a productive territory. "Let's just agree to move forward from here," she suggested, her tone attempting to bridge the gap between them. This encounter could serve as a lesson for everyone involved. Malik nodded, though a part of him remained skeptical. Could an officer who harbored biases really learn from this experience? The road ahead felt uncertain. They were standing at a crossroads, one that could lead to understanding or perpetuate the cycle of mistrust. As Malik prepared to leave, the unexpected happened. Officer Johnson hesitated, then turned back to Malik, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "Look, I know I messed up, but if there's anything I can do to help..." "Help?" Malik interrupted, his voice steady yet incredulous. "How can you help when you were just about to put me in handcuffs for doing my job?" Johnson's face fell. the truth hitting him hard. "You're right. I can't change what happened today, but maybe I can change how I approach these situations in the future. Can we start there?" Malik's expression softened slightly, the crack in his armor allowing for a sliver of possibility. "Maybe," he replied cautiously, "but it's going to take more than just words. It's about actions." As the encounter began to settle, both men felt the weight of the moment, an acknowledgement of their differences, but also a hint of potential for understanding. Just as they were about to part ways, Malik glanced back at Johnson. "You know, not every black man you stop is a criminal. Sometimes, we're just trying to do our jobs too." The words hung heavily in the air, serving as a stark reminder of the reality they each faced in their respective roles. Malik's heart raced as he climbed back into the car, the tension still thick but slightly transformed. As they drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter was just the beginning, not the end. Meanwhile, Officer Johnson stood on the side of the road, grappling with the encounter that had just unfolded. He felt a swirl of emotions: regret, confusion, and a new understanding of the challenges faced by those on the other side of the badge. He knew he had to reflect on his actions and find a way to learn from this experience. The adrenaline that had rushed through him during the stop began to fade, replaced by a nagging doubt about his approach to policing. That night, as he sat in his living room, Johnson replayed the encounter in his mind, each detail etched vividly into his memory. He realized that his assumptions had nearly cost him not just his integrity, but possibly Malik's life. As he sifted through his thoughts, he contemplated reaching out to Malik, perhaps to apologize properly, or discuss how they might work together in the future. But how would he even begin that conversation? Days turned into weeks, and Malik continued his work with the FBI, the memory of that day lingering at the back of his mind. He kept his head down, focusing on his tasks, but the incident with Officer Johnson nagged at him. He found himself thinking about the officer's change of heart, and whether it was genuine, or just a fleeting moment of realization. Meanwhile, Officer Johnson had taken the opportunity to attend diversity training and workshops aimed at addressing biases within law enforcement. He approached each session with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, determined to confront the uncomfortable truths about himself and his profession. He met others who shared similar experiences, hearing stories that echoed Malik's. Slowly, he began to understand the complex dynamics of race and authority. Weeks later, fate intervened again. Malik found himself in a high-stakes situation that involved a suspected gang leader linked to a string of violent crimes in the city. As the team gathered to strategize, Malik felt a sense of urgency that made his heart race. The operation was crucial, and the stakes were higher than ever. With lives on the line, every detail mattered. The operation involved multiple agencies working together, but the tension within the team was palpable. Malik understood that despite the mission's importance, he had to be vigilant and navigate the deep-rooted prejudices that existed even within law enforcement. He had seen how biases could alter perceptions and lead to dangerous situations. His mind raced with thoughts of how they could approach the operation, while remaining aware of the sensitive dynamics at play. As the plan came together, an unexpected name emerged in the conversation: Officer Mike Johnson. Malik's pulse quickened at the mention of the officer who had once stopped him. The team debated the involvement of local law enforcement, and Malik felt a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Would he be able to trust Johnson, or would the officer revert to his old ways? "Look, I know Officer Johnson has had his issues, but he's been working hard to improve," one of the agents remarked. "We need all hands on deck for this operation." Malik weighed his options, the potential for confrontation lurking just beneath the surface. He wasn't sure he was ready to face Johnson again, but he knew the importance of cooperation in their line of work. If there was any chance for redemption for Johnson, perhaps this could be it. When the day of the operation arrived, Malik found himself standing alongside Johnson once more. The air was thick with anticipation and unresolved tension. As they prepared for the mission, Johnson approached Malik, his expression earnest. "I know things were rough between us before," he began, his voice low, "but I've been trying to change how I see things. I want to prove to you that I can be a better ally." Malik studied Johnson, searching for sincerity in his eyes. He could sense the weight of the officer's words, but the memories of their past encounter were still fresh. "Actions speak louder than words, officer. Today is a chance for you to show me you mean what you say," he replied, maintaining a guarded demeanor. Johnson nodded, accepting the challenge. The team briefed each other on their roles, and as the operation unfolded, Malik felt a surge of adrenaline. They were entering a high-risk neighborhood, one known for its crime and hostility toward law enforcement. Malik and Johnson moved in tandem, a mix of tension and focus between them as they navigated the streets. As they approached the target location, the atmosphere shifted. Malik felt the eyes of the community upon them, wary of their presence. He could sense the tension, the mistrust that permeated the air. Johnson, too, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. When they finally made their move, the chaos erupted. Shots rang out, and the world became a blur of action. Malik's instincts kicked in, and he relied on his training, ducking for cover and coordinating with the team. In the midst of the chaos, he caught a glimpse of Johnson moving with purpose, his determination evident. As they engaged with the suspects, the teamwork between Malik and Johnson became a fragile lifeline. Malik found himself trusting Johnson's instincts, watching as the officer maneuvered through the turmoil. Despite the fear coursing through him, he felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, Johnson was indeed working to prove himself. After what felt like an eternity, the dust began to settle. The suspects were apprehended, and the team regrouped. Malik turned to Johnson, their eyes meeting amid the chaos. For the first time, he saw a flicker of understanding in the officer's gaze, a recognition of the complexities they both faced in their roles. In the aftermath, as they processed the events of the day, Malik felt a shift within himself. He understood that while biases were deeply ingrained, the possibility for change was always present. With each encounter, they could challenge those narratives, paving the way for a more just and understanding world. As they left the scene, Johnson turned to Malik, the weight of their earlier tension still present, but tempered by the day's events. "I appreciate you giving me a chance today," he said earnestly. "It meant more than you know." Malik nodded, feeling the burden of mistrust beginning to lift, if only slightly. "We've got a long way to go, but this is a start," he replied, a hint of optimism coloring his words. And so, with every passing day, they continued to navigate their roles, slowly forging a connection built on mutual respect and understanding. Yet, they both understood that their journey was far from over. The challenges they faced, both in their personal and professional lives, loomed large on the horizon. But as they walked that path together, they felt a renewed sense of purpose, determined to confront the complexities of their worlds, one encounter at a time. As Malik and Johnson began to navigate their new working relationship, the atmosphere within their precinct grew tense. The success of the operation had cast a small light on their partnership, but shadows loomed over the precinct as whispers of an internal corruption scandal circulated among the officers. It was said that some members of the department were involved in colluding with local gangs, trading information for favors, and turning a blind eye to the very crimes they were sworn to combat. Malik found himself drawn into this web of intrigue when he overheard two officers discussing a case that seemed more sinister than it appeared. They mentioned a stash of evidence that had gone missing from the precinct's evidence locker, a claim that raised alarms in Malik's mind. As he pieced together the snippets of conversations and offhand remarks, he began to suspect that the case was much larger than just a few bad apples. Days passed, and Malik's curiosity morphed into determination. He confided in Johnson about his suspicions, hoping that the officer would share his sense of urgency. To his surprise, Johnson seemed hesitant, the fire in his eyes dimming. "You don't know what you're getting into, Malik. This isn't just about what's happening in the streets. You start digging, and you might find things that are best left buried," he warned, his tone tinged with concern. But Malik was undeterred. He felt a growing sense of responsibility toward community and badge they wore. He couldn't ignore nagging feeling that there was a connection between the corrupt officers and escalating crime in neighborhood. He decided to launch his own investigation, discreetly gathering information. Every day, he would take small notes and keep an eye on the officers he suspected, creating a mental map of their movements and interactions. In the evenings, he would often meet Johnson at a local diner, where they would discuss their cases, each conversation filled with an undercurrent of tension. Johnson listened, but Malik sensed an invisible barrier between them, as if the officer was grappling with his own demons. One night, as they sat in their usual booth, Malik leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I think we need to talk to the chief. If there's a chance that someone in this precinct is on the take, we have to bring it to light." Johnson looked around, wary of eavesdroppers. "You really think that's a good idea? We're just starting to rebuild trust. What if the chief is involved?" The thought sent a chill down Malik's spine, but he pushed it aside. "Then we have to find proof. We can't just sit here and hope it resolves itself." Johnson sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of their conversation. "All right, but if we're going to do this, we have to be smart about it. No reckless moves. We can't risk our careers or our lives. With their cautious agreement, Malik began to feel a renewed sense of purpose. But as he delved deeper into the investigation, he stumbled upon something unexpected. One evening, while reviewing security footage from the precinct, he noticed a familiar figure entering the evidence room. After hours, Detective Ramirez, a highly respected officer who had always seemed untouchable. Malik's heart raced. He had always admired Ramirez for his work ethic and dedication, but now doubt gnawed at him. As days turned into weeks, Malik followed Ramirez's movements, discreetly observing how he interacted with known gang members. His guts twisted with every new detail he uncovered. What had once been admiration was now tainted with suspicion. One night, Malik decided to follow Ramirez, his resolve firm despite the fear bubbling in his chest. He trailed the detective through dark streets, keeping a safe distance. The chase led Malik to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The area was dimly lit, shadows playing tricks on his mind. As he peered around a corner, he witnessed a scene that sent his pulse racing. Ramirez stood alongside several men, exchanging what appeared to be cash for small packages. Malik's breath caught in his throat, pieces began to fall into place. Without thinking, Malik reached for his phone to capture evidence. He snapped a few photos, his hands shaking. But as he was about to move closer for a better angle, he felt a presence behind him. The icy fingers of dread ran down his spine as he turned to see Johnson, his expression a mix of alarm and urgency. "What the hell are you doing here?" Johnson hissed, glancing toward the warehouse. "You shouldn't be alone out here." "I followed Ramirez," Malik whispered, his heart racing. "You need to see this." As Malik showed Johnson the photos, the officer's expression darkened. "We need to get out of here, now. If he sees us, we're done for." They quickly retreated, their minds racing with implications of what they had just witnessed. Back at the diner, they sat in silence, weight of night's events heavy between them. "We need to go to internal affairs," Malik finally said, breaking the tension. Johnson shook his head vehemently. "No, not yet. We need more evidence. If we go in there with just this, it could backfire. They could easily dismiss it as a coincidence." Malik felt frustration bubbling within him. "But we can't just sit on this. How many more deals is he making? How deep does this corruption run?" "I get it, but we need to be smart. We're in a dangerous game now," Johnson insisted, his voice barely above a whisper. Days turned into a blur of surveillance and tension, each moment filled with the growing fear of exposure. They continued to observe Ramirez, documenting every movement, every transaction. But as they did, the stakes grew higher. Malik couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Then came the night that would change everything. They had planned to confront Ramirez during a scheduled meet, confident they had gathered enough evidence to bring him down. But as Malik and Johnson approached the warehouse once more, an unsettling atmosphere enveloped them. The usual darkness felt thicker, and a sense of foreboding hung in the air. As they neared the entrance, Malik's instincts screamed for them to turn back. Johnson noticed his hesitation. "What's wrong?" "Something feels off," Malik admitted, glancing over his shoulder, scanning shadows for any signs of trouble. Before they could reconsider their approach, the doors of the warehouse burst open and a group of armed men poured out, led by none other than Ramirez himself. Malik's heart raced as the men scanned the area, their expressions a mix of anger and confusion. It was clear they weren't expecting any interruptions. "Get back," Johnson shouted, grabbing Malik's arm and pulling him away from the chaos. They sprinted down the alley, their breaths coming in short gasps. The sounds of shouts and gunfire erupted behind them, and Malik could feel his heart pounding in his ears. They ducked into a nearby alley, pressing against the cold brick walls as they tried to catch their breath. "What the hell was that?" Malik panted, adrenaline coursing through him. "I don't know," Johnson replied, his eyes wide with shock. "But we need to get out of here before they find us." They quickly made their way back to their cars, Malik's mind racing with the implications of what they had just witnessed. As they drove away from the scene, reality of their situation began to settle in. They had uncovered something dangerous, and now they were in over their heads. In the days that followed, the tension only intensified. Ramirez was now aware that someone was onto him, and Malik could feel the threat hanging over them like a dark cloud. Johnson seemed to retreat into himself, the camaraderie they had begun to build, overshadowed by the looming danger. Each day at the precinct felt heavier, the officers around them more suspicious, the atmosphere charged with an unsettling energy. As they navigated their daily tasks, Malik noticed the change in Johnson. He was more on edge, glancing over his shoulder, and his usual calm demeanor had shifted to one of palpable anxiety. Malik couldn't shake the feeling that their investigation was taking a toll on both of them. One night, after a particularly tense day, Malik called Johnson to meet at their usual diner. He needed to discuss their next steps, but as he sat waiting, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. What if they had pushed too hard? What if they were no longer safe? When Johnson finally arrived, he looked different, his expression tight, his movements quick and jittery. "We need to talk," he said, glancing around the diner as if expecting someone to jump out at him. "What's going on?" Malik asked, feeling a knot form in his stomach. "I got a call from a friend in internal affairs. They've been looking into Ramirez, and they think he knows we're onto him," Johnson said, his voice low. "Then we need to act fast. We can't let him slip away. He's a liability to all of us," Malik replied, determination rising within him. "Malik, listen to me. This isn't just about Ramirez anymore. There are people involved that go higher than us. If we push this, we could end up in serious trouble. I'm not just talking about our jobs. This could be life or death," Johnson warned, his eyes wide with urgency. The gravity of Johnson's words weighed heavily on Malik's shoulders. The risks were becoming all too real, and he could feel the walls closing in around them. "So, what do? We need to lay low for a while. Don't attract any more attention to ourselves. Gather more evidence, but be careful. If they think we're onto them, they could come after us," Johnson advised. Reluctantly, Malik agreed. They needed to play the long game, but every moment of inaction gnawed at him. The thought of Ramirez continuing his corrupt dealings while they sat idly by felt unbearable. He couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out, and the stakes were higher than ever. As the weeks wore on, their investigation became a delicate dance of caution and desperation. They continued to gather information, but the fear of being discovered loomed larger with each passing day. Malik's mind was consumed with the chase, the thrill of uncovering the truth, warring with the dread of what lay ahead. Then one night, as Malik reviewed his notes in his apartment, he received an unexpected phone call from Johnson. "Malik, you need to come to the precinct. Something's happened," he said, urgency lacing his voice. "What do you mean? What happened?" Malik asked, his heart racing. "Ramirez? He's been arrested, but it's not what it seems. You need to see this," Johnson said, before hanging up abruptly. Malik's mind raced as he jumped into his car, his heart pounding with anxiety. What could this mean? Had their investigation finally caught the attention of the higher-ups, or was it a trap? Arriving at the precinct, Malik found Johnson waiting for him outside, his expression grim. "They say he was caught in a sting operation, but I don't believe it. It feels staged," Johnson explained, leading Malik inside. The precinct buzzed with activity, officers rushing around as news of Ramirez's arrest spread like wildfire. As they reached the break room, Malik's eyes widened. On the screen, news reporters were already broadcasting the story, framing Ramirez as a rogue officer caught in the act. "This doesn't add up," Malik said, confusion flooding his thoughts. "How could they have known? We didn't tell anyone." "I don't know, but this reeks of a cover-up. Someone wants to make it look like they're cleaning house while keeping the real corruption under wraps," Johnson replied, his jaw clenched tight. Malik's heart sank. This was worse than he had anticipated. They had stumbled onto something far more complicated than they ever imagined, and now they were in deeper than ever. The tension in the air was thick, the reality of their situation settling in like a heavy fog. As they watched the news, Malik felt a sense of urgency growing within him. If they didn't act now, they might lose their chance to expose the truth. "We can't let this go. If Ramirez is just a scapegoat, we need to find out who's really behind this," Malik insisted. Johnson looked hesitant, torn between fear and loyalty. "Malik, if we push too hard, we might end up in danger ourselves. You saw how quickly they moved to arrest him. What if they come for us next?" Malik's determination flared. "Then we fight back. We owe it to ourselves and to the community. We can't let them silence us." But as they stood in the break room, the walls closing in around them, a creeping sense of dread lingered. The conflict was escalating, but the resolution remained tantalizingly out of reach. The stakes were rising, the danger real and palpable. They were caught in a web of deceit, and every move they made felt like it could lead to their undoing. As the news coverage continued to unfold, Malik felt the tension intensifying, the world around him shifting into an unpredictable chaos. The lines between right and wrong blurred, and the stakes grew higher. They were on the precipice of a storm, but as they stood there, uncertainty hung in the air. The next steps were crucial. and the consequences of their choices loomed larger than ever. Would they be able to unravel the truth, or would they find themselves caught in a dangerous game they never intended to play? Malik and Johnson had ignited a fire, but now they had to navigate the flames, knowing that the battle was just beginning. Malik paced the break room, his mind racing with possibilities. He could still see the news footage of Ramirez being led away in handcuffs, the camera flashes blinding him, like a spotlight on a stage. The story painted a picture of a rogue officer, a lone wolf caught red-handed in a web of corruption. But Malik knew better. He could feel the undercurrents of deceit swirling beneath the surface. He turned to Johnson, whose expression mirrored his own unease. "This is a setup. Someone wants to make sure the real players stay hidden," Malik said, his voice low but firm. Johnson nodded slowly, the weight of their situation settling heavily between them. "But how do we prove it? They'll cover their tracks, and we're just two guys against a system that's clearly willing to protect its own." The frustration in Johnson's voice was palpable, but Malik refused to back down. They needed a plan, a way to dig deeper without drawing unwanted attention to themselves. "Maybe we can go through Ramirez's contacts. He must have people he trusts. If we can find someone willing to talk, we might uncover something." Malik's mind was already racing with the possibilities of what they could find. "Are you sure that's safe? We don't know who's in on this," Johnson cautioned. Malik sighed, feeling the weight of his partner's worries. "I know, but we can't just sit here. If Ramirez is a scapegoat, then the real players are still out there, and they'll keep doing what they're doing until we stop them." They spent the next few hours going through Ramirez's old cases, notes, and contacts, piecing together a puzzle that felt increasingly complicated. The tension in the precinct was thick. Every officer they passed seemed to wear a mask of suspicion. Rumors spread like wildfire, each more exaggerated than the last, but the truth remained elusive. As they dove deeper into their investigation, they stumbled across an old case involving a series of mysterious traffic stops that had raised red flags among the department. Malik noted the names of the officers involved, including Ramirez, and the connections they shared with a notorious drug ring known to operate in the area. "This could be a lead," he said, excitement creeping into his voice. "If we can trace these stops, we might find out how deep the corruption runs." Johnson was skeptical, glancing at the door as if fearing someone would overhear. "But how do we access those records without drawing attention?" "We need to be careful, Malik." Malik nodded, knowing the risks involved. They had to move discreetly. "We'll go to the records room after hours. I can access the system with my credentials." Johnson raised an eyebrow, clearly concerned. "What if someone catches us? We're not supposed to be there." "I'm willing to take the chance. If we can find a link between Ramirez and the drug ring, we'll have something substantial to work with," Malik insisted. That night, under the dim light of the precinct's records room, they quietly sifted through files, the silence punctuated only by the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. They found records of numerous traffic stops, each accompanied by inconsistent reports and discrepancies in officer statements. Malik felt a surge of determination as he connected the dots, piecing together a narrative that revealed a troubling pattern. Just as they were about to pull the final pieces together, the door creaked open, and the silhouette of Officer Cruz appeared in the doorway. Malik's heart dropped. Cruz was known for being fiercely loyal to the department, and had a reputation for being a stickler for the rules. "What are you two doing here?" he asked, suspicion etched on his face. Just checking on some old cases," Malik stammered, trying to keep his voice steady. Cruz crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing. "You're not supposed to be here. You know that, right?" "We're just trying to help with the investigation into Ramirez," Johnson said quickly, his tone conciliatory. Cruz hesitated, clearly torn. "I don't think this is a good idea. You need to be careful. There's more going on than you realize." Malik exchanged a glance with Johnson, sensing an opportunity. "What do you mean? You know something, don't you?" Cruz shifted uneasily, glancing back down the hallway before stepping further inside. "Look, I can't say much, but you're not the only ones looking into Ramirez. There are rumors that someone in the department is pulling strings, covering for him." Malik felt a rush of adrenaline. "Who? I can't say. Just tread lightly. There are eyes everywhere. If you're digging into this, you need to be careful," Cruz warned before backing out of the room. As the door clicked shut behind him, Malik felt the weight of Cruz's warning settle heavily on his shoulders. "We need to tread lightly, but we also need to keep digging," he said, his voice low. The following days turned into a blur of late nights and early mornings, their investigation taking on a life of its own. They reached out to Ramirez's contacts, piecing together snippets of information, all while avoiding the watchful eyes of their colleagues. It became clear that Ramirez wasn't just a rogue officer, he was part of a larger network, a cog in a corrupt machine. Malik found himself caught between the thrill of uncovering the truth and the gnawing fear of what would happen if they were discovered. Each new piece of information felt like a double-edged sword, and the stakes kept rising. They learned about a series of high-profile drug busts that had been conveniently swept under the rug. The officers involved mysteriously reassigned or promoted without explanation. One evening, as they sifted through a new stack of documents in Malik's apartment, Johnson paused, his brow furrowed in thought. What if Ramirez isn't the only one being set up? What if they're using him as a distraction while they cover for someone higher up? The thought sent a chill down Malik's spine. You mean someone is orchestrating this whole thing? It makes sense. If they can get rid of Ramirez, they can continue their operations without scrutiny. They dove back into their research, looking for patterns in the officer assignments and past cases. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous their situation became. An unsettling feeling grew within Malik. The tension in the precinct was palpable, and he could sense eyes on him and Johnson. They began to feel like they were being watched, shadows lurking around every corner. The turning point came one fateful night, when they discovered an old case file involving a missing drug shipment that had never been accounted for. The shipment had ties to a powerful cartel operating in the area, and Malik realized that if they could connect this missing shipment to Ramirez and the officers involved in the traffic stops, they might be able to expose the corruption at a higher level. They stayed late at the precinct, poring over the files until the early hours of the morning, their eyes bloodshot but driven. Just as Malik found a key piece of evidence, a connection between Ramirez and the cartel, his phone buzzed violently on the table. He glanced down to see an unknown number flashing across the screen. Do you think it's the department? Johnson whispered, watching him with apprehension. Only one way to find out, Malik replied, picking up the phone and answering. Hello? The voice on the other end was distorted, crackling through the line. Malik, you need to stop digging. You're getting too close. A wave of adrenaline surged through him, but he held his composure. Who is this? Someone who knows what you're after. If you keep pushing, you won't just lose your job. You'll lose everything, the voice warned before abruptly hanging up. Malik's heart raced as he looked at Johnson, who wore a look of alarm. What do we do? Malik's mind raced. They couldn't back down now. They were too close to the truth. We keep going. This is our chance to expose everything. But as they pressed on, the fear of being discovered grew heavier. They began to see shadows in the corners of their vision, felt the weight of unseen eyes tracking their every move. Each time they turned a corner in the precinct, they half expected to find a fellow officer lurking, waiting to confront them. One afternoon, Malik decided to follow a lead on one of Ramirez's contacts, a woman named Sophia, who had been linked to the drug ring. He discovered she worked as a waitress at a local diner frequented by many officers. After a tense conversation, he managed to convince her to meet him outside the precinct that evening. As he waited, Malik felt the tension in the air. He was nervous about what Sophia might reveal and the risks involved. When she finally arrived, her expression was a mix of fear and defiance. I know why you're here, she said, glancing around nervously. But you need to understand that this isn't safe. They have eyes everywhere. I know, Malik replied, his voice steady. But if you have information about Ramirez, it could help us expose the truth. Sophia hesitated, clearly torn. I can't just come out and say anything. If they find out, I understand the risks, but if we don't act, nothing will change. They'll keep doing what they're doing, and innocent people will suffer. Malik felt the urgency in his words. With a heavy sigh, Sophia nodded, clearly struggling with her decision. All right, but you have to promise me you'll protect me if things go south. Malik nodded earnestly. I promise. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to Malik. This is a list of names. Officers involved in the shipments, and others I've seen meeting with the cartel. Malik unfolded the paper, his heart racing as he scanned the names. This was what they needed, evidence that could lead them to the heart of the corruption. Thank you, he said, folding the paper and tucking it into his pocket. But just as they finished their conversation, Malik spotted movement in the shadows. We need to go now, he urged, grabbing Sophia's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They rushed out of the diner, adrenaline fueling their flight. As they reached the parking lot, Malik's heart sank when he spotted a patrol car idling near the entrance. Stay close to me, he whispered, his mind racing for a way out. Just as they approached his car, the patrol car's lights flashed to life, the engine roaring to life as the officer stepped out. Malik recognized him instantly, Officer Daniels, a notorious enforcer known for his ruthlessness. "What are you two doing here?" Daniels barked, approaching them with a menacing glare. Malik's heart raced. "We were just grabbing a bite," he said, forcing a casual tone. Daniels didn't buy it, his gaze sharp as he scrutinized them. "You need to get back to the precinct. Now!" Sophia's eyes widened with fear, and Malik felt her tremble beside him. "We were just... Get in the car." "Now," Daniels interrupted, stepping closer, his tone leaving no room for argument. Malik knew they had to act fast. "I'm not going anywhere with you," he said, adrenaline surging through him. Daniels' eyes narrowed, and in an instant, Malik felt the air shift. The officer lunged toward him, and Malik instinctively pushed Sophia behind him, preparing for a confrontation. Before he could react, a gunshot rang out, echoing through the parking lot. Time seemed to freeze as Malik turned, the sound piercing through the tension. A figure emerged from the shadows, the glint of a gun catching the light. In a split second, everything changed. Malik's instincts kicked in, adrenaline surging as he shoved Sophia behind the nearest car for cover. "Stay down," he shouted, crouching low, heart pounding. The gunfire continued, each shot sending adrenaline coursing through him. Malik glanced toward the diner, realizing they were trapped, outnumbered. "We need to get out of here." Sophia nodded, her eyes wide with fear as she clung to him. They crouched low, ducking behind the car as chaos erupted around them. Officers flooded the scene, some taking cover, while others shouted commands. Malik's mind raced, and he felt a sense of desperation growing within him. They had come too far to back down now. As the gunfire ceased, Malik spotted an opening, a way to slip out of the chaos. "Follow me," he urged, grabbing Sophia's hand and pulling her along. They dashed toward the alley behind the diner, heartbeats racing, as they navigated through the maze of shadows. Every sound felt amplified, the distant shouts of officers echoed in their ears as they hurried to escape. But as they turned a corner, Malik froze, realizing they had run into a dead end. The alley was a narrow passageway, lined with dumpsters, a brick wall blocking their path. Panic surged through him. "What do we do?" Sophia's voice trembled beside him. "Just hold on," he urged, scanning the area for any escape route. Just then, he spotted a fire escape ladder above them. "We can climb up." Without waiting for a response, Malik jumped, grabbing hold of the lowest rung and pulling himself up. He glanced back to see Sophia following close behind, her determination shining through her fear. As they ascended, Malik could hear the sounds of the chaos below, officers searching for them, the tension thick in the air. They reached the rooftop, panting and disoriented, but they were safe for the moment. "Where do we go now?" Sophia gasped, looking around at the expanse of rooftops stretching before them. Malik's mind raced, searching for an escape plan. "We need to find a way down to the next street. From there, we can split up and find a safe place to lay low." They moved cautiously across the rooftop, taking care to stay out of sight. The distant sounds of sirens and shouting officers reminded them of the danger they were in. They needed to think fast. The clock was ticking. As they reached the edge of the roof, Malik spotted another fire escape leading down. "There," he said, pointing toward the ladder. They carefully descended, heart racing with every rung they climbed down. The adrenaline kept them focused, but Malik felt a nagging sense of fear at the back of his mind. They were still being hunted, and they needed to find a way to turn the tables. Once they reached the ground, Malik led Sophia through the back alleys, navigating the winding streets to avoid detection. They finally reached a nearby park, where they ducked into the shadows of a grove of trees, trying to catch their breath. "What do we do now?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Malik rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the weight of their situation. "We need to lay low for a while and regroup. I'll reach out to Johnson and let him know we're safe." As they settled into the shadows, Malik felt a mix of emotions swirling within him. They were in deeper than ever, but they couldn't turn back now. The investigation had become a fight for their lives, and they had to expose the truth before it consumed them. In the following hours, Malik and Sophia remained hidden, the tension hanging heavy in the air. He pulled out his phone, texting Johnson to let him know they were safe. "We've got to figure out a plan," Malik said, turning to Sophia. "Do you think they'll come after us?" she asked, fear evident in her eyes. Malik nodded grimly. "We're a threat to them now. But if we stick together, we can figure this out." As the night wore on, Malik's mind raced with thoughts of their next move. They needed to find allies, people who could help them expose the corruption without endangering their lives. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a message from Johnson. "Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks. I have information." Malik's heart raced. This could be their chance to uncover the truth. "We need to go," he said, determination hardening his resolve. Sophia nodded, her fear transforming into a fierce resolve. "Let's do this." They slipped out of the park and into the night, moving quickly and quietly toward the warehouse. The air was thick with tension, and Malik couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. When they reached the warehouse, Malik pushed open the door, the rusty hinges creaking as they entered. The place was dark, shadows dancing in the corners as they stepped inside. "Johnson?" Malik called out, scanning the area. "Over here," came a quiet reply from the far side of the room. They hurried over to find Johnson huddled over a stack of documents, his face pale with concern. "You guys made it," he said, relief washing over him. "Just barely," Malik replied, glancing around the warehouse. "What do you have?" Johnson spread out the papers, his voice low. "I found evidence linking Ramirez to some high-ranking officials in the department. They've been covering up drug shipments for years, and if we expose this, it could blow the whole thing wide open." Malik felt a surge of hope. "This is it. We need to take this to the press." But Johnson shook his head, his expression grave. "It's not that simple. We need to gather more evidence before we make any moves. If they catch wind of this, they'll come after us." "Then what do we do?" Malik asked, frustration bubbling up within him. "We lay low for now. I have a contact at a local news station who can help us, but we need to be careful." Johnson's voice was steady, but Malik could see the tension etched in his features. "All right, we'll do what we have to do," Malik replied, trying to suppress the anxiety building within him.